In Luke chapter 16, we encounter the story that Jesus told about the rich man and Lazarus. And if you remember the story, the rich man lived very well every day, and Lazarus was out on the street, and he had no friends except for the dogs that would come by and lick his sores, and that was it. And then, of course, both men die. And you are familiar, I'm sure, with the rest of the story. Lazarus went to a kind place, and the rich man did not go to such a kind place. And one of the main things that we see about the rich man in this story is the fact that his life was so insulated that he was out of touch with others who were less fortunate. He was out of touch with the suffering and the pain of Lazarus. And it's one of those things we really have to struggle with ourselves, not to be out of touch with the pain and suffering of others, not to be insulated. Dorothy Day, a Catholic social worker and advocate, said this: we must talk about poverty because people insulated by their own comfort lose sight of it. And that was from Dorothy Day. And I think that's so true. I lose sight of it all the time if I don't remind myself and re-engage. I can lose sight of that, and I can live a life that's very insulated from the pain and the suffering of others. The early church was known, however, for their open-handed generosity. This was an earmark of the early church, and I think it's something that we in the church today in 21st century America should revisit and remind ourselves of. That we are supposed to be people. If you ask, what should the church look like? I think one of the things people would say would be open-handed generosity, that we would help the poor. And I think that's very true. We should actually practice those teachings of Jesus. And so today, I just want you to ask yourself a simple question. What is God's heart for the poor? What is God's heart for the poor? And how can we interact with that? How can we engage with God, with his heart to serve the poor today? All right, thanks. Y'all have a good day. Have a great week.